Rec players feel rushed where the ball is coming half speed and we feel rushed. Yet we watch tennis on TV and the ball is going so fast, yet they never look rushed. So the biggest hurdle that I see with rec players who are trying to copy the pros, it isn't just the shape of the swing. It's where the strings are pointing during that shape of the swing. See, tennis is an edge sport. Whether it's a serve, a backhand slice, topspin forehand, we want to really lead with one of the edges toward the ball. Look, unicorns can't serve correctly. So this is the most cost-effective way to improve your serve.
Watching the pros can be useful, but only if you know what's worth copying. Today, Ryan Reidy from 2 Minute Tennis is back to break down 3 technique ideas all us senior players can borrow from the pros. Ryan is known for taking complicated technique concepts and turning them into simple, practical cues and drills players can use on court. And he works with players through video and match analysis to help them understand what is really happening in their game. We'll look at why so many players feel rushed, what really matters with the racket face on ground strokes, and one simple drill that can help make your serve smoother and more efficient. These aren't complicated changes. They're practical adjustments you could take straight to the court. So let's get into it. Hey, Ryan, it's great to have you on Insider's Playbook.
Mike, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
When we watch the pros, seniors especially, we're often trying to figure out little tweaks we can make to our technique. And I'm just wondering, though, is there really any kind of technique that we can steal from modern pros that can really translate to our game? You know, these ATP forehands and things like that?
Sure. I mean, there are, of course, things to copy and things not to copy. And I think that goes for anybody not named Roger Federer. But one thing that really helps rec players to improve both forehand and backhand ground strokes is to have, and this is what you see from the pros, to have the backswing done by the time the ball bounces.
Okay.
I see this all the time, that rec players feel rushed where the ball is coming half speed and we feel rushed, yet we watch tennis on TV and the ball is going so fast, yet they never look rushed. And it's because rec players tend to use the bounce as the timing mechanism of when the ball hits the ground, then I'm going to prepare. See, pros prepare their racket between the time the ball comes off the opponent's racket and the bounce. I made a Joao Fonseca video on this within the last month on YouTube, where rec players will keep the racket in their ready position and maybe turn their body a little bit. But when the ball bounces, and then after the ball bounces, that's when the rec player prepares. So here's a simple way to actually accomplish this. Like, how do we get our racket to be prepared by the time the ball bounces? And the answer is to think of what's called point your strings to the crowd. This is what you see with Fonseca. He's perfect on both sides with this. That the moment the ball comes off the opponent's racket, you need to turn so that your strings point to the crowd. You have to think of a crowd of people off to your left and right watching you play.
I always play in front of crowds.
You do. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't pay to watch you?
Yeah.
But when the ball comes off your opponent's racket, your goal is to turn, but to point your strings at those people. Now, I just so happen to have a mirror here. So one way you can think of this is reflect the people next to you with your mirror.
Okay.
In your mind. You can do this. You could do this with your students, Mike, is put a racket like this, right? And just put a mirror with their racket. When they turn, they have to think of reflecting. And it's just a nice way to think of it.
I think some of them might look at the mirror themselves instead.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say something, but so the goal is when I watch pros on TV versus rec players, I see the players on TV preparing early, not fast. I don't want to misconstrue that. And so I'll come back to this. I'm going to write this down so I don't forget it.
Well, yeah,
Not
I've got a question to
fast.
ask you about that as well. So
Yeah, because people think, oh, you want me to prepare fast? Driving fast to work is different than leaving early for work. We're not trying to confuse them. I'm not telling anybody to be fast. I'm asking people to be early. And when you're early, you're slow. Now, the question, I'll see if I can guess. The question that people ask then is, well, what if you prepare and now your strings are to the side and the ball hasn't gotten to you yet? Well, wouldn't that be a nice problem to have?
Yeah.
Rarely do people say, Ryan, I play and I'm just too prepared. I have so much time. I have all the time in the world. It's just rarely do people think that. Well, then you'll do what the pros do. If they turn and you point your strings to the crowd and the ball hasn't gotten to you yet, then you just wait there.
Right.
And that is a much better problem to have than being late. And so what I would do for your viewers is I would just have them video themselves, get a tripod or get a little $20 holder for your phone off Amazon and stick it on the fence behind you and just hit record and just rally with a friend for 5 minutes and then scroll through the video and just stop the video when the ball coming to you is on the ground and just check if you had a mirror, what would be reflected in that mirror. And we want it to be the people off to our left and right. And this topic is really the key to being able to take the ball on the rise. So everyone wants to take the ball on the rise. They want to play close to the baseline like Agassi. Well, first off, the only way to take the ball on the rise is for your opponent to hit deep. So if your opponent keeps hitting short, it's really tough to take the ball on the rise. But if you're the type of player who relies on the bounce to tell you when to take the racket back, which is like waiting for the sun to rise to get out of bed. Like, you're like, hey, I miss every early flight I have in the morning because I don't know, I just have this rule, this personal rule. I always wait for the sun to rise before I get out of bed. Be like, what are you talking about? That the sun rises, but we don't base anything on it.
Right.
But that's what the bounce is.
It could be a cloudy day.
Exactly. I didn't think about that. But the ball always bounces, but we don't base anything on it. You're not supposed to base anything on the bounce because if you have a hard and fast rule of ball bounces, now it's time to take my racket back, which I'm telling you, 90% of the people watching this at some time, currently or in the past, have used the bounce unbeknownst, myself included.
Yeah.
And when I was a junior, we used the bounce to tell us when to take the racket back. Well, what happens if the opponent hits really deep, really fast, with a lot of topspin? And now you've got hundredths of a second between the bounce and your hit, and you're going to expect to then get the racket back, drop it, swing to the contact, you're going to be late. So an easy drill to use to actually develop this feeling of early prep and not relying on the bounce is to hit full swing volleys out of the air from the service line. So just imagine you're on the service line, you set up a ball machine on the other service line, and you feed the ball so that it gets you in the air and at a comfortable height, like a ground stroke height when it passes you. The ball comes out of the ball machine, you turn and point your string to the crowd, and then you hit, and you do it on the forehand and backhand. The reason that fixes it is because since there's no bounce, how can you rely on the bounce to trip you up and to fool you into waiting for it to happen to then swing? We want to use something other than the bounce, which is what? Like, when is the ball actually going to arrive? That's what matters, not did the ball bounce or when did it bounce. So when you do a drill where there's no bounce, yet you're taking full swing ground strokes, all of a sudden, when the ball comes out, you have to rely on something else, which is when is the ball going to arrive? And since there's no bounce, you get really good at being on time. Then you go back to the baseline and it's like you'll find what you're looking for. You just trained yourself to look for when the ball's going to arrive So then when the ball comes to you and it bounces from the baseline to baseline, you ignore it. You don't even know it's bouncing because you're so focused on, okay, when is the ball going to arrive? And you prepare early. It's such a simple drill,
I
but it
like
gets
that.
players to get away from relying on the bounce to tell them when to take the racket back. And it gets them to really focus on what matters is when is the ball going to arrive? I need to make sure I'm on time for that.
So let's go in a little bit into technique and pro swinging, forehands, backhands. They're taking large swings, a big C, things like that. When is it more appropriate for us to maybe not try to do some of that in our own game?
So having a C is great. Whether it's a capital C or a lowercase c,
Okay.
anytime we don't have to stop the racket, it's a good thing. The nice thing about a C is the racket never has to stop.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the racket down right away, the racket has to stop and then you have to ramp it back up again. So you lose your momentum and now you're muscling the ball and you'll get a little more tired. You're a little more prone to tennis elbow or gripping a little tighter to really muscle the shot. But when it comes to actually a big difference between what I see when I analyze players and they send me videos, and then when I compare them side by side for the student, I show it right in front of them, right on their computer monitor. They see themselves next to Novak Djokovic or Carlos Alcaraz. I would say the biggest difference is actually the moment where the racket is in the slot. So it's really great let me grab a racket here. It's really great to use a C swing and to draw that loop. But if in the back, your racket is straight up and down right before you hit the ball, if your racket is straight up and down, like you could put a coin on the edge of the racket, then swinging up is like the last thing you want to do. The ball's going to go over the fence. That's
Right.
actually why beginners hit the ball over the fence.
Mm-hmm.
Beginners hit balls up because before they hit the ball, when the racket's in the back behind them, it's dropped down as part of the C, their racket is straight up and down. Well, our arm is a pendulum, and as we swing to the ball, our racket face open. So the biggest hurdle that I see with rec players who are trying to copy the pros, it isn't just the shape of the swing.
Okay.
It's where the strings are pointing during that shape of the swing. And when you really look at what the pros do across the board, even Del Potro, because I love when people tell me that Del Potro didn't close his racket face in a forehand. When you watch the pros, they tilt their strings down at about a 45-degree angle before they swing up to contact. That's how they hit squarely against the back of the ball. Your racket face has to be closed meaning down, and then pointing down, and you do that by literally just tilting your palm toward the ground.
Right.
Or you can have a slightly more extreme grip. Go from Eastern to semi or semi to kind of low semi. I wouldn't recommend your viewers go to a full Western, but anytime you can have a slightly more extreme grip, it naturally tilts the strings down. And that's how you're going to square the racket up for consistent shots. So the shape of the swing is great. And whether you want to copy Federer or copy Nadal or copy Serena, what matters is when they hit the ball, their racket's straight up and down or slightly closed depending on how fast they're swinging. The key to actually getting that consistent contact is in the back. Before you hit, you need your strings to tilt down. So I would recommend all of your viewers to film themselves from the back view. And let's say it's a loop. They use a loop swing and then the racket drops in the back. When the racket drops down in the back and it's about to go to the ball, what is the racket doing? Is the racket on edge like a knife going down through butter? That's going to end up, that's what a beginner does. And then they end up hitting the ball over the fence. Or are your strings closed and then you feel like you're going to keep your strings closed until contact, but what ends up happening is your racket squares up against the back of the ball and you hit a beautiful shot over the net.
Yeah, I see that a lot, like you said, especially with beginners when I'm teaching them, and they all feel like they have that racket with the strings down towards the ground, but
yeah,
all of a sudden the wrist goes like this.
Yes, it opens up. Can I give you a drill that'll trick them into not doing this?
Yeah.
Have your students purposely hit the bottom of the ball, the south pole of the ball, with the top frame of their racket. There is an equivalent on the forehand and the back. And that is to tell the student. So any of your students who have the racket straight up and down in the back, and then the racket opens up by the time they hit, or they try to turn and the racket face changes so quickly, it goes long or in the net or sometimes in.
Mm-hmm.
What you should have them do is say, hey, this isn't going to work. This isn't like some new Rafael Nadal technique. It's just a drill. I want you to try to hit the south pole of the ball with the top frame of the racket. Because they're going to be hitting the frame, they're willing to not do this and
Right.
open up their racket. But here's what happens. A third of the time they'll swing and miss. They'll actually not even hit the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Just prepare them for that. The other third of the time they'll hit the frame as you ask them to do. But the other third, they will accidentally spin up the back of the ball like they never have before. And it's because you tricked them into leading with the edge. See, tennis is an edge sport. Whether it's a serve, whether it's a backhand volley, not backhand volley, as much as a backhand slice, topspin forehand, we want to really lead with one of the edges toward the ball.
Right.
And when it comes to a topspin forehand, we're leading with the top edge. So if you probably can think of somebody, if you have a student who they always open up their racket, and we all have students who do that, just ask them, hey, instead of doing that, try to hit the frame. And let's do that 20 times and just take a count on how many they swing and miss, how many they actually hit the frame, and then how many they actually go, and the ball spins, and they'll feel the brush for the first time, all because you tried to get them to actually hit the bottom of the ball with the top frame.
Right. I love that. That's a great drill. Speaking of serves, what's a realistic technique that seniors can borrow from the pros, and what and what should we just leave on the table and not really worry about it because it's too demanding? But I love, for people listening that didn't see that, you put on your birthday hat, and I know what that means.
Yeah, it was 2014. I was teaching a bunch of 8-year-olds. I remember it was a Thursday afternoon class at 4:00, teaching a bunch of 8-year-olds. They all had waiter's tray serve. And I said to them all, I said, look, unicorns can't serve correctly. And they all laughed. And I was like, no, because their racket would hit their horn. Because
Right.
every unicorn you'll see play tennis has a waiter's tray serve, because if they moved their racket like Kyrgios, they would hit their horn. So I thought to myself, I said, what could I put on their head? So this is the most cost-effective way to improve your serve. But the birthday hat serve, where your racket, after you toss the ball, should pass in over your head, knocking off a birthday hat. And you can go back to Roscoe Tanner, and you can look at Sam Groth, the fastest server of all time. This idea of the racket passing in over the head and the birthday hat being there to give you the instant feedback as to whether or not you hit the hat. And if you didn't, you know that your racket went in more into a waiter's tray. You weren't close enough to your head. It is the single most important, in my opinion, the single most important drill that every student needs to practice in order to understand the path that the racket's supposed to take. Coaches talk about saluting. Beautiful. Everyone talks about palm down. Don't go into the waiter's tray, but have your palm down. But what does that really culminate into? It culminates into the racket path coming in over the head. Because you'll serve and say, well, did I do it? Well, you just wear a birthday hat. So everybody should get a birthday hat and then hit the serve so that the racket goes in over the head from front to back, knocking the birthday hat off from front to back. That's the way you learn the circular motion that's easy on the arm. You're not wrenching your back and muscling your shoulder and death gripping the racket, but you're loose and relaxed like Roscoe Tanner. Wouldn't that be nice? And now you're going to hit easy serves, and your first serve in your match and the last serve of the match are the same speed because it's more of a lasso motion. The serve becomes more lasso-like than toss, shove the racket down your back, and muscle the ball. It's loose, it's relaxed, it's easy on the arm. And with the birthday hat, you get the instant feedback as to whether or not you did it correctly.
The big takeaway from Ryan today is that better technique doesn't have to mean making your swing more complicated. Prepare early instead of waiting for the bounce. And pay attention to where your strings are pointing before contact on your ground strokes. And on the serve, let the racket travel up and over your head in a loose lasso-like motion instead of trying to muscle the ball. Those are 3 simple ideas you can take to the court and start experimenting with right away. And if you learned something from this show, subscribe to Senior Tennis Unpacked so you don't miss more practical ideas from the coaches and experts helping us get better at this game. I'm Mike Rogers. Until next week, play smart, compete strong.